Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Nicomachean Ethics, Book 6, Aristotle will discuss several qualities of mind besides the intellectual virtues that are important for attaining truth, particularly in practical matters. That is, attaining the end that we need. These are, you might say, adjuncts to the virtue of prudence. And as we can see, they all sort of fit into it in different ways. We've already done one video specifically on excellence in deliberation, eubulia. There's two others that we need to talk about: understanding, or sunesis, and consideration, or gnome. These also play important roles, and Aristotle derives a very interesting conclusion in thinking about all of these. So let's look first at understanding. He uses two words here, and he says you can call it sunesis. When people talk about eusunesia, that's the same thing. Good understanding literally is eusunesia. Sunesis is just understanding. Understanding by itself is a good thing. And he specifies not only that is it not the same thing as knowledge or opinion, but it's also not the same thing as prudence. Why not? Well, prudence in a person, as he says, issues commands. It tells you what is to be done or what is not to be done, to do something other than that or not to do that particular thing in a given situation, and it's very important for figuring out, the context and the particulars that one is working with, because, in virtue ethics, there aren't hard and fast rules that apply everywhere to everything. We need prudence to help us figure that sort of stuff out. Understanding is very similar to prudence, but as he says, it makes judgments. It's kritike. This is the word that we get critic from. Kritikes. Krites means judge, so kritike means like a judge. And what does it actually make judgments about? It doesn't make judgments in the same way that prudence itself issues commands. It does so specifically in relation to what other people who are quite often giving us moral guidance or leading us into various temptations, telling us what we ought to do, what other people say about matters that prudence bears upon. So you see that it has to do with the same range of things as prudence, but it's approaching it from a different manner. The prudential person is considering, okay, what is actually good for me, or what is good for this other person that I might want to give some advice to? The person of understanding is able to take in, what hopefully the prudent person is saying, perhaps not prudent, and judge it. Perhaps the person actually says, yeah, I'm not going to listen to that advice because that person has screwed their life up, or they don't seem to know what they're actually talking about. That would in fact be understanding in the sense that Aristotle is discussing here. Another very important quality is consideration, or gnome. Gnome can mean several different things in Greek. It's used in the rhetoric to talk about maxims, which are sayings that people, sort of like one-liners, like a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That's an example of a gnome. And consideration, as Aristotle talks about it in the Nicomachean Ethics, doesn't have to do with just sort of every sort of thing. It has to do with what he calls the equitable. And it has to do with, we can call it forgiveness if we want, but it's a little bit more restricted than that. You might think of it as overlooking or letting something slide. Aristotle, in fact, thinks that there are quite a few things that you should not forgive or allow to let slide. So it's not like, tolerating everything. But he thinks that it's important to allow oneself to give people benefit of the doubt when it's actually appropriate. And what tells you when it's appropriate is consideration, or gnome. He goes on, he says it's not just a matter of being considerate to everybody. He says, this is indicated by saying the equitable man is especially considerate for others, that is forgiving, and that it's equitable to show consideration for others in certain cases. But consideration for others is that consideration which judges rightly what is equitable. Judging rightly meaning judging what is truly equitable, not what somebody just happens to make a case for, or what appears to be equitable, but what is genuinely equitable in that context, in that situation, where the rules get to be bent and where one ought to enforce them. Now, talking about these sorts of other key qualities, Aristotle, a little bit later in the Nicomachean Ethics, is going to say that, this is why we think that these are natural gifts quite often, and we use them kind of synonymously with each other. This is also why, he says, the unproved assertions and opinions, the things that people say and opine, pronounce forth, of experienced and elderly, or of prudent people, not everybody, just those three classes, experienced, older, and prudent. This is why we think that those are just as much deserving of attention as those which they support by proof. The word there for proof is apodeixis, and what I translated that here as is not rigorously demonstrated. So, when somebody who actually has quite a lot of experience in an area, somebody who we call an expert, by the way, the word expert comes from the word for experience. That's why we have, similar expert experience, right? The experti in Latin. The person who has put in the time to have the amount of experience can tell you things about, hey, you shouldn't do that. And they don't have to give you a whole rigorous demonstration in order for it to be right to listen to them, and in order for them to be correct about that. They may in fact be wrong, but odds are they're probably more onto what is right than the average person is. Older people, Aristotle tends to think that older people hopefully have gathered more experience and have done some more reflection. Of course, you wouldn't want to listen to one who you think is imprudent, like, what we talked about here. If your understanding tells you this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, don't pay attention to him. Or if they've managed to totally screw up their life, unless they're talking about how bad it is to screw up a life, maybe they're not a participant in the conversation anymore. Prudent people are also ones who we want to listen to. So all of these kind of work in together in making prudence do its full work. They make it more flexible. They allow us to take in the views of other people where they're relevant, where they can conduce to our own good or the good of others who we need to advise. And ideally, they all function in harmony with each other within the person's soul or personality or mind.